From small steps to big ideas, language is at the heart of who we are. We talk it through, we hear you out, we write the words, we read out loud. It's finding the way, exploring new places, discovering new people, and making the difference. It's stories to hear, tales to tell, opening doors and opening minds. Don't just write, communicate. Don't just talk, discuss, debate. Announce yourself, make a noise, speak your mind, and prove your skills to the world. So spread your wings, expand your horizons. It's a big world out there, and this is your journey. With us, you'll be inspired, you'll be supported, you'll be your best. This is more than learning English. These are your hopes and dreams. We are Cambridge Assessment English, and we're here for every learner, every step of the way. From small steps to big ideas, language is at the heart of who we are. We talk it through, we hear you out, we write the words, we read out loud. It's finding the way, exploring new places, discovering new people, and making the difference. It's stories to hear, tales to tell, opening doors and opening minds. Don't just write.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session. We are delighted to have you with us today. My name is Yvette Qureshi, and I am Business Development Manager with Cambridge Assessment English. I look after the North India region here. Before we actually start this session, just to say, like many of you, we are also working from home, and we are aiming to give you the best experience. But we are also relying on the home Wi-Fi. So in case if there are some issues, please bear with us, and we'll be back as soon as possible. Hopefully there are no issues, but just in case if there are any, just please bear with us. And just to let you know, we are live from India and UK both, so just keeping our fingers crossed. Also, before we start, we recommend you to use their headphone to get the better audio quality, and we also suggest if you got any computer program running in the background like Skype or similar to Skype, please close that application so that this platform is much more stable for you and you get a seamless experience during the presentation today. During the webinar, we request you to use the chat option to ask any questions that comes to your mind. And once you'll start writing the chat, you will see a round circle just in front of the chat. So if it is a question, just mark it as Q so that we don't miss on any of the questions that we wanted to ask. Today we are aiming to have a presentation for about 35 to 40 minutes, and the remaining 15 to around 20 minutes, we'll have a Q&A session in the end. So whatever concerns you will have after the presentation, or if you want to seek any clarification, we'll be happy to answer those in the end during the Q&A session. So once again, welcome everybody for the webinar on introduction of Cambridge Personal Style Questionnaire. In short, we call it CPSQ. In fact, in last 1 year, the approach to teaching and learning has changed a lot. Students are away from their support network of teachers and students, in fact, their friends, and there could be, they could have discourse from their normal routine of learning, and which can have an impact on their academic success. To understand how CPSQ can be really beneficial for students, for their parents, because nowadays parents are spending much more time with their children, so it is very important for them as well if they can help them to improve, and obviously for the teachers and the schools as well, how they can utilize CPSQ in improving the academic and overall well-being of the students. So we have our expert from UK who will let us know about all that. So to introduce CPSQ to us, I am happy to welcome my colleague, Ms. Yvette Qureshi. She is the Senior Marketing Manager with Admissions Testing Team. She has been working for Cambridge Assessment for last 15 years, initially as part of Cambridge English and then moving to the Admissions Testing Team around 7 years ago. But before I hand over the platform to Yvette, some other housekeeping guidelines for all our participants. As I mentioned earlier, that since most of us are working from home, so there could be some, technical issues or some personal challenges. So if that happens, please excuse us, bear with us, and we'll be back as soon as possible. And during the presentation, if you are not able to see the presentation or if you're not able to hear the presenter, you will find a reconnect button on the center top of your screen. Just click on that button, and on majority of the issues, this will sort out the problem for you. Right. So I think we are ready to go. And we also have Mr. Manish Puri. He is the Head of Business Development for Cambridge Assessment English. He looks after the South Asia region today. So first we'll start with David. We'll go through the presentation and then we'll be joining you again for the Q&A session. Thank you. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much. And just to say what an honour it is to be here with you today. Thank you very much for giving up your time to come and learn about the Cambridge Personal Styles Questionnaire. So I'm just going to start my presentation now. And okay, there we are. Hopefully that's on screen for everyone. So as Abhishek has said, this is about the Cambridge Personal Styles Questionnaire, or CPSQ. So this is an assessment of attitudes and behaviours that support educational success and well-being. Now, well-being, of course, is coming to the fore in the current circumstances. Students have been going through some very tough times. So I'm going to focus in on that as well as on the academic aspects. So I'll talk first about CPSQ for schools. But we also have a version of the assessment available for teachers as well. And I'll mention that briefly at the end as well. Okay, so I think to introduce this, I mean, I don't think I need to tell any of you who, with your experience in the educational setting, that what students do is as important as what they know for academic success and also for their own well-being. And this is something that's borne out in research. So researchers have consistently found that personal styles, as I say, that means their attitudes and behaviours, how they tend to approach tasks, contributes to positive academic, job and life outcomes. So for instance, one study we've quoted here found that self-discipline predicts academic performance of adolescents better than IQ or previous academic results. So what is CPSQ for schools? So it's a questionnaire of attitudes and behaviours or personal styles. So it allows you to get an in-depth and systematic insight into these sorts of personal styles. It allows a sort of greater analysis of this than you can pick up through interactions in a day-to-day basis. It's a more in-depth look. It provides a student competency report with personal description of strengths and areas for improvement. We'll have a look at one of those reports later. And it's taken online when and where you want, and it can be used on PC, tablet or mobile. So where we're thinking about circumstances where students are learning from home at the moment, it's very possible for them to take it from home. It's not an assessment that's designed to be taken as part of a test session. You don't need to get people together in a hall to take it. It doesn't need to be invigilated. It's not a test like that. But I'll go on to explain more. So we'd say it's suitable for learners from aged 14 plus. That's because of the cognitive demands about thinking about behaviours, reflecting on behaviours. This is the age group we'd say it's suitable for. And the minimum English level would be around level B1 on the on the Common European Framework. So CPSQ has been in existence for a few years now, and it went through a really rigorous development process, and it was developed by psychometric experts here in Cambridge. It took 4 years, the development. looking at the research into the personality models behind it, development of questionnaires, and trialling with a really large number of students. Over 4,000 students were involved in trialling the assessment. And if you're familiar with personality assessments, CPSQ is aligned with the renowned Big Five personality traits. There's the extroversion, neuroticism, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and openness. So we're working with those familiar models of personality, but our framework applies it to the core behaviours and attitudes for success and well-being in educational settings. And as I said before, the point of CPSQ in a school's context is to support a holistic approach to academic achievement. It's about looking at the whole person, looking at their behaviours as well as and their behavioural preferences as well as their academic achievement, and putting that all together to help them succeed in terms of their academic performance and their well-being in an educational setting. And as we are at the moment, we're in a situation where a lot of things have changed. Students have been subject to a lot of stresses, a lot of, in both personal terms, but in terms of the shift to online learning, the isolation from their colleagues, from their teachers. And in this context, we can think about it both in how we would use it now and in terms of when we come out of this situation. How can we understand strengths and weak areas? How can we implement support for these students? And how can we build back better? How can we go back and help the students to be strong and perform to their best? So this is the competency framework for students. These are the areas that we look at, and this is the areas covered in the reporting. So we have thinking style, which is we look at their intellectual curiosity, their open thinking. We have a study competency, which is really about their motivation to achieve and their self-management. It's related to conscientiousness. Coping, which is looking at the resilience, adaptability to demands. We look at their communication style, so their social confidence, how they communicate, and their collaboration, about how they work with others. So this is all about how they tend to do things, how they tend to behave. It's not looking at their achievement, it's looking at their behaviours. And of course, we've all found ourselves in a terribly difficult situation at the moment, and I wanted to kind of look at how some of these competencies are relevant to what students may be going through at the moment and how they could support in these circumstances. So the coping competency, I think, it will help you identify students who are in general less able to deal with stress and change. And at the moment, it can help you identify students who are in need of extra support. Students who don't cope with change well, students who don't bounce back after problems. These could be people who are really struggling. And the study competency, I'm not sure of the local situation here, but in the UK, a lot of us have come back into schools, but people are talking about a bit of an epidemic of demotivation. Students really, they're struggling. I think, as someone who's been working from home, I know that you can struggle to keep your motivation up, that you can struggle to focus on goals. And how can we imagine for students, for young people, this is even more challenging. So either while they're at home or when they come back into education, once we recover from this situation, I think we can help identify students who are going to be struggling there. And then we can put into place actions to help with that, whether it's planning around time management, study skills, prioritization. We can help them. Now, communication skills are also something which have been, situations have interrupted normal lines of communication at the moment. Normally, where students are in a class together, they've got their teacher, they've got their support network around them. But when they're at home, you may find, I've heard from people about, students who turn the cameras off, who are not participating in lessons. And these could be students who, really feel less able to ask for help from teachers and from their peers. So looking at the communication competencies, we can help identify these. And collaboration is also an area where, students aren't collaborating in the same way as they would be in the classroom. We may be able to identify people who struggle with building collaborative relationships. So all of these factors are things where, this assessment could help in identifying the students who may be struggling. And as I say, it's an online assessment, so it's the sort of thing that can be taken at the moment or later on to kind of help open channels of communication, to help understand what the students are going through and what challenges they may be facing, and try and implement support. I know we've heard from teachers about, whether they're introducing more either formal or informal mentoring opportunities, or whether, they just have class discussions around how they're feeling, or, personal care calls from teachers. And I think this can really help uncover information that students may be less, willing to put forward. Okay, so I want to just take you through a bit of how CPSQ looks. So as I say, it's an online assessment and it's a very straightforward format. Students are presented with statements in pairs of 4s about their behaviours, about how they think, feel, behave, interact with other people. And they are asked to state to what extent they agree or disagree with these statements. And you'll see that these statements are all mixed up. So there may be statements about their study competency, statements around communication, and they're asked to rate their level of agreement here. And overall, the assessment will take 20 to 40 minutes to complete. But of course, this is a difficult thing to reflect on behaviour, and some students may want to agree to all of these statements that seem like positive things. So the next step is where they've strongly agreed, for instance, to a range of statements, students are asked to reflect and say which is more like them and less like them. And this helps them to really think about their behaviour, and it overcomes the tendency people have to, strongly agree to all the positive statements and strongly disagree to negative statements. So you'll see that they really reflect on their behaviour. Now, you may be familiar with these sorts of assessments or not, but just to say that this is not it's not something where preparation is required. As I say, we're not trying to provide a certification of any level of achievement. What we're trying to hear is help understand students' behaviours and attitudes so we can support development in this educational context. And along with that is the fact that we do not need any preparation. So there's no preparation course, there's no preparation materials. And that's because there are no right or wrong answers. We want people to look at this, come afresh to the statements and respond positively and honestly about how they behave. And it's a really intuitive format. So there's an example at the beginning that tells them how to use it, but it's just a very straightforward assessment, and it's sort of designed to feed into learning and not doesn't require preparation for it specifically. Okay, so here's a bit of a look at the reports. So the report is presented on screen at the end of the assessment, and it can be downloaded as a PDF. And so for each of those study competencies, for the thinking, study, coping, communication and collaboration, they'll have a section of the report. And you can see here, this is an example of study. So students are provided with a score on the scale of 1 to 5. And we'd say that typically higher scores indicate that behaviours are more likely to support educational progress. What the score means is, in comparison to the average student, is this person, does they have a higher degree of motivation to achieve and self-management? But as well as the scores, we've got these positive, neutral and points to improve. And that's because we're not trying to give people a score, to help them access anything. It's just an indicator for them to understand how they are in comparison to others. But the really useful bit for us is these points here, so which can help feed into personal development. So, and these points are personalized depending on the student's responses. So they talk about things that they do well, things that are neutral, or points to improve. And out of these things, we can of course come up with, look into what activities, what conversations to have in order to help these students improve. So for instance here, this person rarely plans and prioritizes activities. So we could, for instance, look at, activities around planning, helping them to manage things. And it says they typically like to work in an unstructured way and at times can be disorganized. I think these are things where there are quite obvious things that we can do to really try and help this student. So for we get the format with the scores for the thinking, studying and coping, but for communication and collaboration, we don't give a score rating. And I think this is because these are areas where all different personal styles have positives and negatives. So instead, we get pairs of feedback statements showing potential advantages and disadvantages to the behaviour. And I think this is interesting to kind of talk through these things and to think so for students to really reflect on how their behaviour, their natural behaviour, could work well in some circumstances or it could work less well in others. So if we look at the top bullet points on here, it says you often start conversations with new people and tend to be talkative, which is a very positive point. But it says you tend to be uncomfortable with silence and might talk before others have had time to think. So that could be something which in a group situation, a team working situation, could, potentially have a negative impact. And I say these are just points for people to reflect on. Okay, so in terms of using CPSQ results, so I've hopefully helped you understand a bit about the format and the kind of the points coming out of it, but how this can be used. So it can be used either as part of a classroom activity. At the moment, it could be something where as part of your plan for looking at student well-being and how students are coping, this could be taken by a class, and it could be as part of a class discussion around these things, or as well, this could be part of one-to-one mentoring or coaching, or as part of support mechanisms. So it could be for students to think themselves and discuss, or it could be a one-to-one conversation if where things need to be followed up with a teacher, or with, we've heard about people doing more peer mentoring or mentoring with older students. So it can be implemented in a range of contexts. And we can provide you with some support materials and some training on how these results can be used in your school. There's a picture here of a user guide that we provide. And just to let you know, this is an area we're continuing to work on. So we are currently developing more classroom worksheets and activities to help you integrate this into lessons. So I just wanted to share a bit of a case study here. This is from, before our current situation started, before the pandemic, but this is just an idea of how it's being used in a school in the UK in sort of normal times, if we can say that. So this is Passmore's Academy in the UK, which is a school which has a very mixed area, including quite a lot of underprivileged students. And they're quite well known for using innovative approaches to, student support. And they wanted to introduce a student mentoring program for a selected group of students, because they had identified some students who were at risk of, they were students who they thought could go on well to perform and achieve, their GCSE results. But these people were at risk, for various factors. So they wanted to provide extra support to make sure these people succeeded. And they identified, student mentoring as a way that they wanted to go forward. but they wanted a way to help focus this on things that were going to really matter. They're very strapped for resources. They don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of money for funding this. So what they wanted to do was they started using CPSQ as a way to gain insight into the areas that are particularly of need for an individual student. So before the mentoring program, these students took CPSQ and their results highlighted the areas that needed to be focused on for each individual. And then when they came to their mentoring time, these were the key areas of focus. And this really allowed them to make the best use of the time. And it helps make, the programs more efficient by saving time. So for instance, if you had a student who was very strong on self-management, you didn't need to waste time on, focusing on those sorts of areas. But the student may perhaps have issues with coping with demands and then, needed an entirely different approach to the mentoring. And in fact, this particular issue was something they had a very, very, someone who seemed like a very good student, but, they were not quite, things weren't going quite right for them. And when they took the CPSQ, something that came out of it was specifically this coping with the demands areas. They didn't cope with stress. They didn't cope with changes. And they had a very sort of low opinion of themselves. They didn't believe in themselves. So when it came to the mentoring, they were able to take that into account. And they're also able to share this with the parents as well, to help the parents understand the issues there. And I think, implement some very supportive and, nurturing mentoring efforts all around to help this person really feel the confidence to succeed. And one thing they particularly found useful was that they said it's a very useful point to open up conversations. So in all circumstances, you'll have students who are less likely to come forward to discuss problems, who are less likely to open up about personal circumstances. But I think at the moment, with teaching online, this is even more important at the moment to try and open up these conversations. And sometimes the point from coming from an assessment and having this shared vocabulary, which is not personal and which is not critical, so you don't have to say what's wrong with you. You don't have to say you haven't been performing well in this area. You can look at, you can have a discussion about the assessment and how they compare to the average person and how they feel about that and what they think might influence that. It's another kind of way to approach these issues in a non-judgmental and supportive way. And, we've got a case study here, so got more details available on our website. Okay, so just to sum up really here, CPSQ for schools, as I say, its key uses would be to understand hidden barriers to achievement, to identify those students in need of extra support, which I think now more than ever is really, really important, and it's more challenging to do so. It can be used to focus and tailor student support and mentoring programs, as with the school I've talked about, by gaining an insight into what matters, what's going to make the biggest difference with the time we have available. And it can help motivate student interest in personal development. I think sometimes students can feel a bit disheartened because sometimes they don't understand why they're not doing so well. And I think being able to drill down into these behavioural areas and give them a language and give them an understanding of how they can improve can really get them interested in their personal development if they can understand. Because I think sometimes they don't have the ideas and they don't have the vocabulary and to sort out what it is that's holding them back. And as I said, approaching these conversations with a shared language. Now, just a few minutes before the end, I wanted to talk about CPSQ for teachers because, as I say, CPSQ, it's basically based on a personality assessment, looking at these areas which are widely understood as supporting educational and career progress and well-being. So it's we have a very, very similar assessment with a few key differences, which can basically be used to support teachers in very similar ways. So it can be used both as part of teacher training, either initial teacher training or ongoing professional development, and it's suitable, within the training context and within schools. So here is our professional competency framework. So this is a framework that we use for reporting, and there are more areas here. But what you'll see is that they're very, very similar in terms of the working with others, coping with demands, self-management, engagement with learning is like our study competency. But we've got a couple of extra ones here. So right at the top, we've got caring and compassion, because for someone who is in a role like a teacher, as part of one of the caring professions, this is something that is really important to how they will perform in their role. And we also have a competency around professional practice, professional behaviour, compliance with standards, which again is really important as a professional person. And it's really, I think the uses are very, very similar, because I think, within our working lives, we face the same challenges as in our educational settings. So, but one of the top ones, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute, is tackling teacher retention. This is a huge problem here in the UK, and it can help you spot factors which can contribute to dropout. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But it can also, encourage and guide reflective practice amongst teachers. I think it's, teachers are constantly trying to reflect on how they do things and how they can improve, and it can be a basis for discussion there. Similarly, as well as students, teachers are really in a context at the moment where they may need extra support. We all struggle with coping with demands. We all struggle with, self-management. So all of the things that I've been talking about for students can equally apply for teachers, and it can be used, again, within coaching, mentoring, or just opening up conversations with peers and managers, whatever the support networks are or whatever training programs you have in place. It just allows this focus on behaviours to kind of gives it a structure and a vocabulary as part of these discussions. So got another case study from here in the UK. So this was actually the first organisation we were working with, is Suffolk and Norfolk School-Centred Initial Teacher Training. So that's a very long title, but basically in the UK there's several different routes into teaching. There's the university-based route where you go and study your degrees in education, or where you get your postgraduate certificate of education, or there's the school-centred initial teacher training, which is more based in schools, going straight into the classroom and learning the theory alongside the teaching. So that's what this organisation focuses on. And this organisation, like with all teaching organisations in the UK, they identified a problem with retaining trainee teachers. And they started up a project to really try and gain insight into, first of all, what factors were affecting teacher retention and, trainees going on to complete the course or get into their schools, and also what they could do to help support people. So the first year they implemented this, they used it so not as part of recruitment, but when people were starting the course, initially they had the new trainees take CPSQ, and they, at the end of the year, they did some analysis about personality factors and looked at people who'd done well on the course and people some people who hadn't completed the course. But at this stage, they weren't sharing the results with the teachers. But they didn't really find this a very satisfactory way of doing things. So when it came to the second year, they decided that the much better thing to do would be to use CPSQ as part of a development process, as part of conversations with the trainee teachers. So they, the new trainee teachers took CPSQ, and this really, fed into their personal support, their conversations with tutors. So it, did things like, for instance, they say here, if a trainee's answer suggested they had an issue with coping with demands, we made sure that they worked with a particularly experienced and supportive personal tutor and mentor. The person also said, for instance, if they, if self-management was an issue, they might give them a slightly, assign them to a slightly different mentor who could help them more with managing work, managing time, who could help them more with self-discipline. So matching to mentors was one thing they did, as well as looking at, the content of their development sessions. And we actually did some research along with the Open University looking at this, and there's a published research article on this, into factors which affected both dropout on the course or factors which were protective and which high achievers on the course had. And so what they found was people who struggled with the course, that dropped out or postponed going onto it, these people often had significantly lower scores on the coping with demands. This was a trend that they found. Whereas teachers who scored highly were also quite typically high on self-management, as well as coping with demands. So yeah, this kind of shows, some real world data about how these, the CPSQ competencies relate to dropout or doing well on the course for teachers. And there's a really interesting webinar. I might just share it in the chat for you, just in case anyone is interested in that. It's a presentation of the research around that. I'll just pop it in the chat box there. So that's a really interesting webinar we did presenting the research around the teacher retention. Okay, so just finally to sum up, we would obviously be delighted if you are interested in offering CPSQ at your school. And I think the local team here are going to ask for any expressions of interest. So there are two different routes to doing this. With lower numbers, you can be paired up with a centre who can offer CPSQ to your school. Or there's also for schools with larger numbers of students, you can become a CPSQ centre for your own students. So, and this, of course, offers, a range of benefits for you. I think it's a really nice way, as well as, the benefits that you get, it can really help you demonstrate your commitment to learner development and well-being in terms of to parents and the teachers. It gives a focus, it gives a structure for looking at some of these aspects. And of course, if you're a CPSQ centre, you can access a slightly lower board fee of the assessment and use the CPSQ logo on your websites and as part of your promotion of using the assessment. And if you're a centre directly, you get access to the platform where you can manage your own assessments. It's a very intuitive system and you can set them up there. Okay. I think that's about all. So I think if we've got any questions, I think I've got some time for answering questions now.
Thank you so much, Yvette, for sharing the information on Cambridge personalized questionnaire with us and all the participants. And now I would request participants to use the chat option. If you have any questions, if you want to seek any clarification regarding CPSQ, please use the chat option. And in the meantime, I could see some questions have already been asked. So the first question I could see is from Mr. Vaibhav Joshi. So he has asked, CPSQ makes a lot of sense to me. It's a well-designed program. How do Cambridge International affiliated schools get access to this? So may I request Mr. Manish Puri to take this question, please?
Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you for your time for the presentations. It's been very useful. I can see a lot of questions coming up, and on the current question that is there, I think for the current schools which are already affiliated to Cambridge, we end of this program, and now Abhishek will float around a form. If you could give, number one is your feedback and on your expression of interest. Based on your expression of interest, we will get in touch with you. And one option is that we have partners in India who would be ready to share or deliver the CPSQ for the students, which means they can give you the access for your students so that you can pass it on to the students for doing the CPSQ. Other option is that if you would want to be a center, if you're making it part of your curriculum or part of your school structure, wherein all your students, let's say age group 14 and above, you would want to offer them CPSQ, we would be happy to make you an independent partner, like you are a partner for Cambridge. So both options open. We will discuss that with you. What option do you think will be suitable? And we will take it forward from there. So that's, I mean, it's very easy. You just need to pass on the logins to the candidates, and the candidates can do the test at home, and you can get to see the reports and discuss the reports, as Yvette said, with the students there.
Right, thank you. The next question we have from Dr. Diptesh. So he has asked two questions. The first one is CPSQ available free of cost, or is it a payable service from Cambridge if any school plans to opt for it? And the second,
okay,
is would Cambridge share this presentation to be shared by us with our school administration to approach further?
Okay, we will share the recording of this webinar, right, Abhishek?
Yes.
After the webinar, yeah. So we will be sharing the recording of this webinar. So the presentation is there, and you can just share the link with the school management. And your first question, yes, it is. There is a board fee. Like, I mean, Cambridge schools have a board fee, or Cambridge tests have a board fee, or Cambridge English qualifications have a board fee. So there is a board fee there, which is per candidate, and which is payable, depends on the number of candidates you have. So multiplied by that board fee is something that will be payable to Cambridge for CPSQ.
Right, thank you. The next question, I think this is for Yvette. So Ms. Rosie Merlin has asked, is CPSQ customized according to institutional needs? And also, how does CPSQ for schools work? Is it like an access point or license?
So no, it's not customized. It's a standard assessment, and so the way it works is there's a central online system, and so if you're a centre, you go in, add the platform, and what you need to do to send. So you literally need the candidates' email addresses, and you upload their email addresses into the system. You could do a bulk upload. It's very easy. And there's a email template which is customizable, so you can make some options, and then you press send, and the link, so an email is sent to the people who you want to take CPSQ. You can tell them when you want them to take it, so they can have the link. You can either let them take it within school time or from home. As I say, it can be taken on mobiles, so they go in and complete the assessment, and then the report is ready instantly. So it's a very, very simple system.
Thank you, Yvette. And Ms. Jasmeet Seth and Ms. Manju Sharma has asked similar questions. So they've asked, can we get some literature to share with our management? So I would request if you could, so we have pasted a link in the sticky notes just above the chat option under the yellow background. Below the yellow background, you will see a link. This is a link to express your interest for CPSQ. If you could fill up this form, so we'll get a notification and we'll get in touch with you, and we'll share the detailed brochure regarding CPSQ so that you can share it with the higher management. Okay. Is there any other question that any participant would like to ask? Please feel free and use the chat option to ask the question.
I think there's a question from Ms. Shruti Modi asking, what is the price? The price is, we'll have to put you across to one of our partners, and the partner will give you a proposal, and based on the candidates that you have, based on the volumes that you have, they will prepare a proposal and share it with you. The cost, just to give you an idea, ranges from around This is somewhere around 15 pounds. GBP 15 is the price for the student. You are free to, the schools are free to add their admin costs to that to come at an end user fee. So the end user fee will be vary on volume. It could be a little bit lower or a little bit higher based on the volume. So that is the ballpark. You could take it as a 15 pounds.
Okay, and we have another question from Ms. Geeta Lakshman. So she has asked, is this applicable only for affiliated schools of Cambridge, or any board could take up?
Oh, this is for any board. I mean, be it an ICSE board, a Cambridge English board. We've had a similar session before, wherein we invited the CPSC schools also. It could be, I mean, we have some participants who have joined us from Nepal, so it could be a Nepal board, or it could the Nepal National Board, or it could be Indian CBSE or the ICSE or the International Board. I think that question came up because today we invited a lot of our Cambridge International schools and also schools which are currently offering something related to the admission testing services. There are other qualification products tests that are available. So we invited those schools which are currently Cambridge, partnered with Cambridge. So I think, yes, that's where the question came in. But this is, it's a global test. It is not meant specifically for a particular board or a particular country. So anybody can any student can take that. It's the age group recommended, as Yvette told, is 14 and above.
And the two participants, Ms. Shivani and Ms. Vandana, they have asked similar questions. So it's like they've asked, there is no CPSQ for younger children 11 to 14 years. And Ms. Vandana has asked, is CPSQ for grade and grade 2 standards available? So as per my knowledge, it is not available right now. Maybe Yvette can give more information if there is any plan for assessment for the younger children.
No, I think at the moment we don't have any plans for assessment for the younger age group. I think the reasoning behind that is that I think it's quite a complicated thing to kind of, understand your behavioural preferences, your attitudes, be able to evaluate. It's quite, it requires a lot of self-reflection that perhaps for a younger age group might be more challenging to do. I guess, students are, some students are more mature than others at that stage, but our guideline is 14 plus, and we don't currently have plans to produce a version for a younger age group.
There is a version available for higher age groups. So there is a CPSQ for adults, as Yvette talked about, and there's a CPSQ for teachers there. But I think the age group that has even the 14 and above age group that he was talking about is a very, very recent addition. Earlier, only CPSQ for adults was available.
Yeah, we started very much working with higher education and healthcare sectors. That's where it developed out of. So as you say, there are sort of versions for there. But yes, we've kind of moved into this younger age group more recently. Yeah.
The next question is for Yvette from Ms. Vinzel Chapria. So she has asked, who explains the report to the students? Does one need special training and qualification to explain it to them?
As I said, we can provide some guidance and support, but I think it's really up to how you want to use it in your school. I mean, it's it could be, it's the sort of, it's a straightforward language. So with some students, they can look through it and understand it themselves. Or if you want to have a teacher or, some schools are, there's an increasing, really kind of thinking about how it would fit within your context and make that work. But the reports, they're quite, quite straightforward language, and they're designed to be kind of suitable for this age group to understand. So it's, it should be, as I say, we've got the user guide we can provide along this with sort of some hints and tips, but they're designed to be quite straightforward as well.
Thanks, Yvette. There's another question from Ms. Kavita Sharma. So is there a minimum number of students that you consider for CPSQ? Manish, if you could take this one.
Yvette, I think I'll probably have to pass this on to you. As per my understanding, it's around 10 candidates minimum that would be required to do the test. But if there is any global conditions that you have, or is it something that we can, for the India market, it could be flexible in terms of volumes, the minimum volumes?
We don't currently have any minimum volumes. I mean, as we've stated, I mean, it's not something which has to be taken as part of a test session, you know, so you don't need to gather a group together, or you don't need to have everyone. You know, I think, you know, in terms of the, you know, setting up the centre and the admin that comes alongside with that, I think, you know, the local team will want to ensure that it's, you know, some sort of numbers there. But I think, yeah, we're sort of a bit flexible with that.
Thanks. So next question is for Yvette only. So Mr. Vaibhav and Miss Rosie, they have asked similar questions. So the question is, in your experience, how frequently do children take this test? And Miss Rosie has added that, can CPSQ for students be taken periodically to check if there is a progress through entering?
So I don't, we wouldn't recommend its use as a sort of a, you know, test in, test out, you know, sort of taking it regularly to sort of benchmark things. It's really, as I say, it's kind of designed to support exploration of, you know, their behaviours and personal development. So we wouldn't, we wouldn't suggest using it sort of, you know, providing an assessment and then providing some sort of actions as a follow-up and then doing the assessment again. Because I think, as I say, it's a personality-based assessment, and certainly at this age group, you know, there are, you know, the attitudes and behaviours are things that people can work to improve, but you don't expect, you know, massive differences within a short time scale. So we wouldn't recommend using it sort of a you know, benchmark to see progress after a few months, or, you know, that sort of thing. So people could retake it, you know, the following year. But I think, you know, we recommend it as attached to a kind of a, you know, activities around personal development.
And thank you, Yvette. And if you could also tell us if the CPSQ is applicable for the students with dyslexia.
Yes, I mean, it's, you know, as I think it's suitable. I mean, it's not timed, so I think, you know, students with dyslexia may, you know, so they can have all the time they want to read it. So I think it should be fine. I mean, it shouldn't, you know, I think the sort of behavioural areas that it's getting at should be applicable. I've got to confess, I'm not an absolute expert in this area, but having spoken to experts about other, you know, special educational needs, there's no reason why it shouldn't be suitable, you know, for these things, as long as you're not trying to, you know, it can't help diagnose any educational needs problems, but it should be perfectly suitable for use with all groups of students.
And there's a question which is very in the similar lines to the last one. So when is the right time for students to take up CPSQ? At the start of the academic year, or at the end, or in between? So if you're
on a break, wouldn't really make sense. It could be at the beginning of the year. That would be a really interesting usage. Or I mean, it could. It kind of depends how. I mean, we do have context, not in schools, but we have an example in higher education where Imperial College London use it towards the end of a year. But I think so their purpose there is, what they do is they have students who've come into their first year, and being Imperial College, you know, it's an engineering degree. They have students who are, of course, extremely academically bright. But sometimes they found that these students struggle at, you know, on their first year, and they get to their exams, and some of these students may not perform as well as they have expected, and they don't really understand why. So they've introduced the CPSQ alongside the first year exams in their course to help them understand that academic performance is affected by other factors, such as, you know, these motivations, coping with demands, and so that, you know, so that the students can understand alongside their exam results where they can improve. But I think that's in a slightly different context, where it's more, even more emphasis on the student to take this information and go away and come up with their own action plans and get ready for the next year. Whereas I think, you know, I'm not a teacher, I haven't been a teacher, but in a school context, perhaps more, you know, towards the beginning or during the year as you want to implement it, you know, alongside, you know, a supportive plan for student development throughout the year, that might seem to make more sense to me in a school context.
Right. And we have another question, that should teachers also have a yearly frequency or a half-yearly frequency for the CPSQ for teachers?
As I say, we don't have a recommended frequency, and I don't definitely half yearly. I don't think we'd expect to see any significant, you know, differences. We don't recommend it for, you know, trying to benchmark and then do some things and then test the, you know, whether the interventions have, you know, have helped. So, I mean, it's, as I say, it's, you know, they could take it again after a year. I think it just depends how your kind of support mechanisms for the teachers are working. But for instance, in the teacher training program I talked about, that was once as part of the course. They took it on entry to the course, and that fed into the kind of development activities, that fed into the mentoring, their conversations with their tutors throughout the course. So they just used it once as part of that.
Right, thanks. And Ms. Manju Sharma has asked, what is the benefit of taking this test for university admission purpose? So can we use a CPSQ for maybe for higher education one for university admission purpose as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Within a higher education context, we'd say it could be used for admissions. Not in a school context, we wouldn't say it's appropriate to test, you know, personality as part of school admissions, but for higher education, and I think it's, if you're thinking about, if you've got very competitive or large scale selection processes, it could be one of the factors. You wouldn't use it on its own to kind of select people in or out. So one of the places where it's most used in universities is in healthcare. And I think that's because there are some very specific, you know, demands on the person as opposed to what they know within healthcare. So universities tend to be interested in the caring and compassion element. So for for healthcare, they use the professional report like the teachers. So obviously, if applicants to a healthcare course through their responses show that they're not very caring, less caring than the average person, you know, you don't want that person to be a nurse. You might not want them to be a doctor, you know, depending on the role. And also coping with demands, you know, I think we know more than ever now how stressful healthcare professions are. And in some contexts, they may find that, you know, people who are not very able to cope with demands may not be suitable for a healthcare role, may not do well, and may not be happy in that kind of role. But there are more general competencies. So we wouldn't ever use them, try and select in top scorers. It's more about trying to identify people who really wouldn't be suitable and to sort of remove those as part of your sort of large scale selection process. You could also use it if it's a course where you interview. I don't know how common that is. It could be used to kind of ask, you know, follow up on, you know, areas where if someone's low on an area and you're not sure, you may want to talk about it more with them. You know, say you've got a lower than average score in this area. Why do you think that is? How do you think this is going to work on our course? So, yeah.
Right. Thank you, Yvette.
Just to add there, I think if Ms. Manju, your question is a test for admission purposes, we have a couple of universities in India taking another admission test from Cambridge, which is called TSA, Thinking Skills Assessment. And that is being used for admission purposes. And I mean, if you want more information on that, just get in touch with us and we can share how that is being used for the university admission. So that is TSA, Thinking Skills Assessment. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, before we get on to the last question, because I can only see one question now, I would like to request all the participants that we have shared the expression of interest and feedback link in the sticky notes option, sticky notes. So please use that link. And if you're interested to offer CPSQ for your teachers or for your students, please fill up that form and we'll get in touch with you with the more details so that you get to know more about it and so that you can offer it in your institution. And now coming to the last question, Ms. Renu Bhatia has asked, does it not have a pre or post format for the CPSQ test?
Sorry, what's that? A pre or post format? So I'm not quite sure what's meant by that.
Okay, I think by that they meant that a pre-test and then providing a holistic approach, the support program, and then again doing a CPSQ to check the progress of the student. Maybe that is what they think.
Yeah, we don't, as I say, we're not suggesting to, we're working on developing more activities and more resources to help people implement the results as part of their setting. There's no preparation needed, so there isn't really anything to help prepare for CPSQ. But then, as I say, again, it's not, we don't anticipate people using it as a benchmark and then testing again after a program of activities. So yeah, so we do have some support resources already. We're working on providing more to help you, as I say, more sort of classroom activities and things to help you implement it. That's in the pipeline, although, a little while away yet.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we have reached the allocated time. So thank you, Yvette. Thank you, Manish. And I would also like to thank my colleague, Kevin, who has worked in the background to make this event possible. So thank you, everyone. And a special thanks to all our participants who came